Hi, everyone, and welcome to Heal Endometriosis Naturally with Wendy K Laidlaw. Wendy has spent the last 2 years helping women with various stages of endometriosis to heal naturally after putting her condition into remission. After her own healing success from stage 4 endometriosis and adenomyosis, she's inspired to heal others, and her goal is to help some of the 175 million women know that there is another way other than painkillers, drugs, or surgery. This is the place to be for real talk with real people for real results, so you can learn how to heal your endometriosis naturally. Please note that the opinions expressed in this program may represent options, but are not a substitute for proper medical care. Before starting any new healthcare program, we recommend you consult with a health professional.
Hey everyone, it's Wendy K Laidlaw here from Heal Endometriosis Naturally. I'm always so excited when I bring special guests onto the podcast and YouTube channel because I'm very selective who I do bring on, because I believe that the people that I bring on offer excellent kind of input and advice, and of course, value to you as well. So my guest is Scott Cranfield from the good old UK. It's great to have you here, Scott.
Hi, Wendy. Thanks ever so much for having me on. It's a real privilege. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's lovely to have you on, and you've got such wonderful stuff to share. So I'm just going to give you a bit of background for people who haven't heard of you before. But okay. Scott is an experienced and highly acclaimed mentor, author, and speaker. He has coached at the highest level for over 30 years, appeared on television, radio, and magazines, as well as hosting many seminars and being a keynote speaker. His coaching subjects cover from life coaching, family relationships, to sport and business. And Scott is also a PGA master professional, as well as the author of The Wise Bear Stories, which is a beautiful collection of little stories designed to help parents and teachers deal with emotional challenges and anxieties. And the common thread throughout all of Scott's coaching career has been an obsession to find not only a better way, but a natural ways to sustain, and help people, get better at what they do, and help people, look at things and overcome negative emotions and potentially even dissolve them. Now, if you've been on the Ultimate Emotional Health Summit, you may have heard a little bit from Scott, but we're going to be hearing a lot more from him today. So welcome, and it's fantastic to have you here.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. And that was a pretty good sum up, I think, of everything. When I listen to that sometimes, I think, wow, that's a fairly eclectic and busy life, but it's kind of how I like it. And as you said, I'm just the consistent thing for me, which I think is similar for yourself, is there's a fascination with, can you just keep peeling back the onion, keep peeling back the layers to find a little nugget of something that kind of helps people in different ways, as well as yourself, obviously.
Well, that's it. And it's interesting that you use that analogy, an onion, because that's exactly the analogy I use when it comes to like healing the body. It's coming down through the layers to get to the core of what's causing the sort of the pain and inflammation. But one of my, as you know, my fascinations is emotional health. And I think the fact that you've had such a broad experience adds to this, like the tapestry of what you offer. But perhaps you could just give a bit of background information of kind of like what has led you, I mean, we skimmed over it, but perhaps I think you mentioned in the Ultimate Emotional Health, your story when you were younger. And I love that, because that's clearly had quite an impact on you, but perhaps you could just share a little bit background of that.
Yeah, no, of course. So really, I guess should we say the career I'm in now and the journey I went on probably started when I started getting into golf, which was around about the age of 12, 13. And for anybody that's played golf will know it's a very challenging sport. And it is much more mental. Well, I'd say much more mental. There's a huge part of it is mental as well as it is the physical. Yeah. And I progressed really well as a golfer, and I made good progress, ended up representing my county, playing at a pretty good level. And then I turned professional fairly young, around about the age of 18. And pretty quickly, I didn't hit the standards that I wanted to hit as a player. I wasn't achieving that. But I worked harder than probably anybody I knew at the time. I literally would when I was old enough to drive, I'd take my mum's car up to the practice ground at night time, put the headlights on, I'd still be going. I'd have the bleeding hands because I was hitting so many golf balls. So it wasn't a lack of effort. Yeah. It wasn't a lack of desire, but something was happening that was stopping me getting the results. And it actually got to the point where I at about 21, I just said, I've had enough. I can't put myself through this anymore. And because it was emotional turmoil, and that's what I was going through. And so when I stopped, for which was only about 6 months actually, I started to read and I started to educate myself. And at that point, truthfully, I probably hadn't done anything outside the mainstream. It was just whatever everybody else was doing in golf, I tried to do. And I decided to start reading and elsewhere. And I started with golf, but some of the things I read made me curious about psychology and human behavior. And I started to go off on a different journey. And by doing that, I then started to learn things that I was never getting exposed to in golf. And so, but was helping me mentally, helping me get clear, helping me to balance my emotions. And I started to bring that into golf, but actually I wasn't really bringing it into my own game because I was sharing it with others. I just found myself compelled to want to tell other people about what I'd found out. And so very quickly I realized I'm actually enjoying this. I like sharing this information with others. And that's really how my coaching journey started. So I did play a bit more, but I actually found I loved the sharing and the researching more, which is interesting. Actually, if you're a player in any sport, sometimes you can have too much information, but as a coach, you probably can't have enough. You know, you always want to find out more and more and more. So there's a bit of a conflict there, but I love the coaching journey. And then really from that, because of my speciality in golf coaching, I got to work with some of the best players in the world. And as you mentioned, I was fortunate enough then to work on TV for many years. But because of the nature of what I was doing, which is really the human behavior and the emotional side, I got asked to help people outside of golf. And so that started to branch into their life. And then as a business owner, I was applying some of what I'd learned about human behavior into business and systems around people. That's what I am. I suppose I try and understand people and why they do what they do and those type of things. Yeah. And so I got as you said, a very broad spectrum where I started to work across all these different fields. But there was a common theme, which was really trying to help the human being. Yeah. And then when I became a father, you know, my kids, once the eldest one got to about age 5, they would go to school, and as most parents will relate to, some of those classical school challenges started appearing that I wasn't ready for. But I thought, wow, this would be easy. This would be no problem. You know, I've got this skill and this understanding. I'll be able to help them, no problem. Yeah. And but I was wrong, you know, because I wasn't communicating in my child's 5-year-old's language. And it took me a while, but eventually I was frustrated because I thought, well, I've got all this information and this knowledge and I'm helping people, but I'm not really solving anything with my 5 and then 6-year-old. So what I started to do was, well, one day it just dawned on me. I took her day that she'd had, and she'd had some different friendship issues, and I created a story. And in the story, I created this character called the Wise Bear. And the whole idea of it was the Wise Bear, the children would come and see the Wise Bear. They would share their challenges, their emotional challenges they'd gone through, what was upset them, what had frustrated them, what they were worried about. And the Wise Bear would just ask them questions and help them gain a whole new perspective on that situation. And then they could see it differently. And when they saw it differently, they brought their emotions back into balance, and then they were able to cope much better. Well, they really worked. The stories were fantastic, and they worked with my kids, and we did that just for many years. And then last year, through some encouragement, I decided, actually, I think this has value. And so I decided to publish the stories. And as you kindly mentioned, we're very pleased with the feedback we get, and those stories are now out there and available. And we've even taken that stage further now. Actually, I have been going into schools and working with some schools, certainly pre-lockdown. And I've now created a course to go along with those, which is for parents and for children. There's different videos and modules for the parents or the teachers as there are for the children. And that's just literally become available in the last few days, really.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And my daughter is a primary school teacher, and I've been sharing your kind of work with her, and she's already super excited, and I bought your books for her to kind of read, and it turns out some of her little ones in her class had already heard of your stuff. So it's fantastic that your work's getting out there. And I'm going to come back to those books in a minute because they're fabulous. But something that you said quite early on in your journey is just like, it wasn't through the lack of trying, like when you were sort of 21 and you were doing everything. And to the women that are listening to this, I think that it kind of correlates. You might feel that they're doing everything within their willpower. I know on my journey, I felt I was doing everything that I possibly could. But sometimes we don't know what's available beyond what we know until we start to expand our mind a little bit more. So that was quite interesting that you
Sure.
saying that you had that. And I think I picked up on this before when we've interviewed you in the Ultimate Emotional Health, that where did that burning desire come from? Because it sounds like you were aware that there was a block, or there was a status quo, or there was something there, but you were hungry for more information. Where did that come from?
Well, I think I heard a saying many years ago, because I noticed myself saying with golf, I've tried everything, I'm not getting any better. I've tried everything.
Yeah.
And I heard somebody say once, if you tried everything, you would have found out the way to get yourself better. So you haven't tried everything.
Love it.
And I thought, I didn't like that at the time, because I thought that was frustrating, but I thought actually that's true. And so I guess that gave me the burning desire to, and it was coupled with that and a total belief that actually all of us can have a really amazing balanced life. And what I mean by that is I actually do believe it's possible. Everyone will have different outcomes in different things, but I do believe, we can have good health, we can have financial success, we can have a career we love, we can have relationships we enjoy, we can have a social connection. I do believe that. And I think that's a really important point. If you're not going to have that level of hope and you're not going to have that level of belief, then you have to accept the fact probably things won't change.
Yeah.
And so I think, there was a really lovely story as well from many years ago where somebody was going off searching for, I think it was diamonds or gold.
Yeah.
And the search went on for years and years and years and years. But eventually he succeeded. And it was like, well, you would never have done that unless you had this belief that someday I'm going to find this answer and I'm going to find the result. And so that was really important for me, hearing that message and having that hope that I think, just know you're going to have bad days as I was doing with the golf, and you're going to have days where you feel like you've gone backwards, and you're going to have days where you feel like you've tried everything, which you haven't, but you're going to have days where you feel like you've done, and it's just not getting the result. Just know that, it's worth having another look. It's worth, in our day today with Google, just searching in a slightly different way, which probably leads us to a really important point, is that a huge part of our thought process is really the questions we ask ourselves on a daily basis. There are things we have which are habitual questions, which just we keep repeating to ourselves. Well, what most people don't realize is that every time you're asking yourself this question, your brain keeps searching for an answer. And so understand the type of question you ask yourself is going to have a huge effect on the way you feel and then the results you're going to get. There are only three things in life we can control: our perceptions, our decisions, and our actions. They are the only three things you ever will have control over in your life.
Yeah.
You perceive something, the decision you make based on that, and then the action you're going to take.
Yeah.
Well, probably at the forefront of the thing that affects the perceptions hugely is the questions we ask.
Yeah.
And if we stick to this, if we don't change our questions, and this might actually answer your original question in a better way, if we don't change the question we ask ourselves, we won't get a different result.
Yeah.
Albert Einstein is famous for saying the quote, that the definition of insanity is repeating our actions of yesterday and expecting a better result today. So if you do want a different result, if you feel stuck with your health or anything, if you feel stuck, actually start with the question. Become aware of what questions am I asking myself each day, because they might be things like, how comes I can never get better? How comes I can never find the answer? Why is it I always feel low in energy? Well, again, every time you ask that, your brain is going off and searching and giving you, and you may not be conscious of the answer, by the way, you may not hear it at a conscious level, but it's going on. And so it's really important to start saying, to change those questions. Maybe say like, okay, I haven't found the answer yet, but what are the 10 things I could now try that would give me a different answer? Not necessarily the answer, but a different answer. Who could I go and ask today that might give me a different opinion?
Yeah.
What search term can I put in Google that might lead me to something I've never found before? Now, the amazing thing about the human brain is every time we ask that question, the brain starts to search and it will help you find a different answer. And that simple process could start a whole new perception, a whole new decision, a whole new action, which is then another habit, and a habit that's going to be more effective for you. So have I answered your question?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I completely agree. When I ended up being bedridden for 2.5 years, I knew that I needed to think outside the box. I needed to think differently because I needed to shift my focus. My focus before was just on the painkillers, drugs, and surgery, which was making me sicker. And that's when I kind of thought, well, I have to do something different. So that involving doing something different meant that I had to look at things differently, because I used to use that exact same phrase at Albert Einstein. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
And I knew that I was going insane trying to kind of like get the result that I sought from this pathway, which was making me sicker and sicker and almost near total organ failure, so that, so I knew that, and I guess this leads on to this question beautifully, and you answered that question brilliantly, is kind of, so what stops people from, what stops people from thinking differently? Is it a case of they need to be, is it like they say people are driven by two things, pain or pleasure. Is the pain, emotional pain, not bad enough to force someone? You say that sometimes, I think Tony Robbins says, sometimes there's life events can happen and then your life changes in an instant. But I think what certainly what I do with the women I work with is try to increase their awareness. So it's kind of like, okay, as you say, what questions am I asking myself? Because I think that's very powerful, isn't it? Yeah. Even just if women are listening to this, it's like, yes, so what is the narrative going on inside my head? We're not here to say, you are bad for thinking that or anything like that, but just increasing, sometimes because there's a constant dialogue going on. I think that's the key thing, isn't it? There is always a dialogue, and there's lots of different, I refer to them as parts within us, because we can be in different situations or in different people, and we'll think differently depending on who and what we're around. But what do you think prevents people from, because what's exciting, I know from my journey, is there was so much fear attached to everything that I did, every thought, every feeling, every action. But I recognized that was deep subconscious conditioning. But when actually I just keep taking action, that then created courage to then create confidence, and that confidence created more courage. And then with each little step, there was that sort of build upon build. So what do you think, in your opinion, prevents people from perhaps even being open to the idea of that?
I think there's a couple of things. Let's go to what I think is the softer one first of all, but a very relevant one, is that when you're in the world you're dealing with, you're in pain, you're in discomfort, it is hard to sometimes to see the future that you want. And as a result of that, you may not even consider setting a goal, setting something for you to achieve, something for you to look forward to. You might start to feel like that's not possible, I can't do that. Well, we mentioned earlier in the first conversation that the word hope, or I mentioned the word hope. That's like a goal. You've got to have something to work towards and something to look forward to. Now, one of the things that often we tend to do is we overset, we set goals that are too big. They're too grand, they're too far away, and therefore actually they don't have the impact on us. Now, particularly if you're challenged by health or anything else, you need to come down and start smaller. And you need to have little daily goals. And so, from a health perspective, that may be just one little habit that you're going to introduce today. And you're maybe going to make sure you do that habit for 2 or 3 or 4 days, and then maybe a week. And then you're going to have another second habit set up to go from there. And it's a lovely little saying that success equals a few simple disciplines repeated every day. And failure is a few errors in judgment repeated every day. So if you think about that, if you're, and I don't like the term failure, but I'm just giving you as it was quoted. But if you think about that, if you're not getting the results you want, it's probably you're probably repeating, again, these questions. You're repeating these habitual questions, the same ones every day. You're doing the same habits every day. And so it goes back to the insanity. Why would you expect something different? So let's create a little bit of hope. Let's set some small goals that you can work towards. Now, the more important part of that is that then we need the emotional attachment to the goal, which is what some people refer to as the why. Why do you want to do that? Now, that's sometimes easier when they're bigger goals. So why do you want to achieve this goal? Let's say if your dream house or your dream holiday or whatever it may be, or dream relationship. Sometimes it's easier to hook onto that. But there's a saying that when the why is big enough, the how will take care of itself. So if you're going to even set little goals, again, if we're going back to somebody that's maybe in pain and discomfort with their health, if they're going to set little goals just for that day, even in that, think of why is that important to me? What's that going to do for me? And connect your emotion with that, you know, and build on that. And I would say, make sure you write that down. Don't just have it in your head. Start to write down, why would that be important? And see if you can come up with as many reasons as possible that would then help you to be able to move forward. So I think it's really that people don't move forward, you know, in a simple term, they don't move forward because they don't have a big enough reason for doing it.
Yeah.
Well, that's quite challenged when you're not feeling very well. So let's come smaller. Let's start with some small baby steps and goals, but have a bit of a plan, at least for a month, of, right, I'm going to do this new habit for 1 week. Then I'm going to keep that habit going and layer another habit on for the second week. And then the third week and so on, and do that. And I think as a result of that, then the emotions come a bit more, oh, now I can see why I want to do it, but write down the reasons why. And when you are thinking of the reasons why, if health is your concern, people tend to think only in the health area. Don't do that. There's 7 areas of life in most models. You've got your health, your well-being, you've got your social, you've got your family, you've got your financial, you've got your mental life, you've got your spiritual life, and you've got, did I say the 7th one there? Your career. You've got your career. Yeah. When if health is your challenge and you're saying, right, how does me doing this one little habit for this week, how's it going to benefit me? What's the why for me? Think of it across all 7 areas. Yeah. You may not always have a benefit in all 7, but you probably will have it in quite a few. And the moment you do that, you can start to see, this one little change in habit for my health actually is going to impact socially. It's going to impact my career. It's going to impact my mind. It's going to impact my family. And when you can, that now is creating a big why. One little habit now suddenly can expand out and create a big why. And then you'll take action.
Yeah, no, and I think I think even just having this discussion, and I hope people listening to this can kind of go, oh, okay, I can try that. And even if, you know, if it's baby step is too much, even an ant step, you know, just one small step, and it could just be just increasing your awareness of the questions you're asking. It could just be writing down your thoughts when you wake up. It could just be one small thing. It could just be one line. It could just be one thing, just increasing that. And I like how you brought that in about into all 7 areas of your life, because I think that's it. It gets very, very linear. But I guess this kind of leads into, you know, your wise bear stories, because we're all byproducts of our conditioning. You know, a lot of us are you know, end up ill, or in situations or in relationships or careers and stuff that make us ill, make us sick, because subconsciously we've been conditioned into thinking or feeling a certain way, and we don't even know it. We're just acting out. And that's what's super great about increasing the awareness and being aware of the questions. But it kind of leads us into the school system. I was reading a fantastic book called Recovery of the Inner Child. I don't know if you've read it. But it talks about how, you know, again, if you look at children when they're very young, they're very right brain orientated. They're very expressive. They're when they're sad, they cry. When they're happy, they shriek. But what happens, obviously, in the educational system, and as they grow up, they get, you know, funneled into left brain to sit still. You know, my daughter, you know, she's a teacher, and she says that it's really, she says, I say to my boys in particular, you know, I don't expect you to sit still for the next 3 hours. You know, if you want to tap, instead of tapping the desk, tap your thighs, and, you know, and if they have a, you know, and she engages with them. But again, I think the point I'm trying to get to here is, like, we are byproducts of our thinking and our environment and our condition. And sometimes we don't even realize it, and we're so in it, we can't see above it. And this is where the wise bear stories is lovely. And you know, and for women that do have children, you know, that kind of want to expose not only themselves but their children to this new approach to thinking and increasing their mindset. Maxine was sharing how one of your stories was about this boy who didn't want to do his maths and things at school, and of course that's very left brain, so you can imagine why. But in your story is you beautifully bring in how you kind of relay the maths to a football pitch, and engaging left and right brain. And I guess the reason I'm bringing that up, and I'll hear more from you in a minute about that, is sometimes we get so left brain, we get so analytical and logical that we forget to engage other parts. And I guess that's what you're saying as well, with the whole, you know, asking questions, taking small steps, visualizing, and being really, you know, seeing what we can do now. Because if it's too big and too far reached, we just have that feeling of despair and giving up and not having any hope.
No,
so
sure.
so how have you found that kind of manifest itself, you know, in what you're doing?
Yeah, I tell you, Wendy, when you were talking there, something's gone through my mind related to that, which I think might be very helpful for your audience. So I'll share this if I can, and it's exactly the line you was going down, which is that when you're young, you don't tend to be aware so much of the social rules, the social conditioning, and so you are a bit more expressive of being yourself. And there's every chance you'll probably be quite well as a result of that, well mentally, well physically. Yeah. I am a believer that we tend to then, as you say, we get older and we start to try and fit in with society, and we fit in with society's rules and all the rest of it. Well, I have a challenge with that because society's rules are not based on human behavior. Yeah. They're based on some system that they thought was appropriate in schools or whatever it was at the time. Yeah. From a wellness perspective, from a health perspective, I think one of the greatest gifts you can give to yourself is to be yourself. Yeah. And I think one of the things that makes people, the work I do, one of the things I see that causes the biggest emotional challenge for people is an unrealistic expectation on themselves or on others. Yeah. And the unrealistic expectation often is trying to be somebody they're not. Yeah. Trying to fit in, trying to please others, trying to do a career that their parents wanted them to do, trying to follow a pathway that they were told by their teacher they should follow, whatever it may be. Yeah. And so the more we can be thankful for ourselves the way we are, the more we can recognize what actually we love to do, and the more we can also give ourselves permission to be ourselves. And what I mean by that, and I may have said this to you before, but I do a lot of work with a gentleman called Dr. John Martini, who's actually was voted top human behavior specialist of the year this year, interestingly. And he often asks the audience a question, and I use it a lot, and I hope this will resonate for your audience. If I said to anybody, are you always happy, never sad? Always positive, never negative? Always kind, never cruel? Always giving, never taking? Everybody says, no, not all the time. And then I say to them, are you always sad, never happy? Always negative, never positive? Always taking, never giving? Always cruel, never kind? Then they say, no, not that either. But when you say, are you sometimes happy, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, sometimes giving, sometimes taking, every single person says yes. Because what it does when you give people that question, it actually gives them permission to say, oh, yeah, that's who I am. And do you know what? That's how every human being is in the world. But sometimes we can try and live to these rules that we should always be a certain way, always be happy. And if we're not happy, there's something wrong with us. And if we're not positive, there's something wrong with us. Well, no, those things serve us as well. Negative feedback is essential to help you grow. And so as a human being, we grow our most when we're actually getting challenge and support. If you had a child and all you did was support it, its whole life, do everything for it, when it wanted it, when it needed it, did everything for it, it would never mature.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of my friends' son, a friend of a friend, exactly, that grew up like that, went off to university and had to come back home. He had to leave. He couldn't cope. No. You know, so life is about balance. It goes back to what you were saying before. It's that balance thing.
And if you took the same child or another child and was overly hard on them, you know, then they become precocious and probably become independent too quickly. Yeah. And as a result of that, cause themselves challenge. So we need this perfect blend of challenge and support. Well, the truth is actually that's generally going on in our life all the time, but we don't recognize it. Yeah. And so I think the question you asked me, it was the point I wanted to make, is that I think from a wellness perspective, from a health perspective, one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves is to actually not try and fit in, to be ourselves, to appreciate ourselves who we are, find out what it is we love to do. Yeah. And even if you are challenged with an illness right now, find out how it's serving you in some way, because it will be. It's not all negative. There will be some value and some service to you. Yeah. It's maybe giving you time to do something. It's maybe connecting you with somebody in a way. It's doing something. Maybe you're learning something that's going to take you on a new journey. Yeah. So there will be some benefit there. If you can see that, you can start to appreciate yourself for who you are. And you then, I think, as I say, that to me brings some of the greatest wellness you'll ever have. And that, yeah. So anyway, that was my.
Yeah, no, totally. And I know on my own journey, you know, I wouldn't change a single thing, even though it was dire and desperate and horrid. but I learned so much, and then I had this hunger to learn more. And you know, and I guess you know, some people's philosophies is that dis-ease or disharmony shows up in the body, because there is that, as you're saying, people are trying to be something that they're not, or please other people. And again, you know, if we go back to the classrooms, you know, we're told that we should do this, we should do that, we should be this, we should be that. And invariably, I think any pain or symptoms that show up in the body is an opportunity for people to kind of go, who am I? What do I think? What do I feel? And know that it's okay to do that.
Yes,
and one of my programs is Embracing Emotions, Empathy and Energy. And I have a kaleidoscope, what I refer as a kaleidoscope of emotional chart, because there's like, I think over 120 different emotions. I think I read something the other day, they said there were 600 different emotions. I'm like, crikey, I need to go and explore that more. But I'm like, that, I remember when I first saw that chart and I was like, oh, okay. Like you're saying, I don't just have to be happy and then be really concerned if I'm sad, or do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, it's okay to be me. It's okay to have unpleasant feelings and pleasant feelings, because I think the sad thing is a lot of people can deny themselves of pleasant feelings by trying to stay away from the unpleasant feelings. Unpleasant feelings, I believe, are messengers. You know, if you're angry or sad or depressed, it's probably because it's an emotion that's trying to communicate. You know, we say we're molecules of emotions. There's a reason why that is showing up. And it goes back right to the very beginning of what you're saying about increasing the awareness about, well, why has that shown up? Allow us to take time to reflect. And invariably, my belief is, and I know from my journey, I was just head down, bottom up, and my body just said no. And I had to take stock. I had to look at what I was thinking, what I was feeling, my mindset, the life the job I was in, the relationship I was in, you know. So there was a lot of things in my life then that I was trying to conform to be this stereotype, to be this perfect person in inverted commas, which just doesn't exist, and it's exhausting trying to attain the unattainable.
Exactly. You've got this unrealistic expectation on yourself. I think it was the Buddha has a quote, which is that the source of all human suffering is the search for that which is unobtainable.
Absolutely.
You know, so again, it's this thing of, you know, if you're going to try and be happy your whole life and you think it's wrong when you're not, that's more of the issue. That's unobtainable. You're going to suffer as a result of that. So let's be realistic with who we are as human beings. And as you said there, it's feedback all the time. If you're feeling sad, it's probably feedback that you've either not seen the whole story, or you've got an unrealistic expectation on yourself or an event that you went to or somebody else. And it's just feedback to help you grow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the tools I suggest to my listeners and to my students is to journal, is to actually write ink on paper.
Yes, absolutely.
It's such a fantastic tool. I mean, it's completely changed my life. This morning journaling, and as well as doing meditation and things. And I'm not talking about humming on top of a hill elevated off the ground, but just doing mindfulness, you know, that for the busy mind is such a good way to help calm it. So I want to talk more about the Wise Bear stories, because I think they're so beautiful. And I really believe that as adults, again, it comes right back, and it makes me feel quite emotional, actually, even this when I'm talking about the being in school, we're taken away from, we're cruelly pulled away from like kindergarten, where we play with sand and clay and crayons and water and mucky stuff, and then we've got to sit uptight and upright, you know, behind a desk, and we got to write everything. If I was trying to memorize a script, because I'm preparing this video for next year, and do you think I can memorize the words? No, I've had to literally handwrite everything out, draw pictures around about it. Right. Like, what is wrong with my brain? I know I'm very right-brained. I'm very analytical, but I'm very right-brained as well, very pictorial. But I'm like, what is wrong with my brain? And, you know, I did okay at school, but that was not, you know, I was more art orientated and music and stuff. So it brings us right back to, you know, the Wise Bears is a beautiful explanation of how to handle things. And again, this is kind of feeds back in beautifully to what we're talking about. If we're having to think differently about something, and I think the worst thing is, again, we can get a lot of projection put upon us as we're growing up from just toxic people out there, teachers, parents, you know, people in authority, and then you take that on as truth. And I think what I love about your books is from a very beautiful, simplistic perspective, because we all have that inner child in us that perhaps has gone into hiding because we had to be this perfect person and do this perfect career and all that kind of stuff. it's a beautiful way, not only for our own inner child, but also for our own children to connect with them as you did, to actually maybe just kind of plant a seed of, oh, I didn't think I could think of things that way. I know on my own journey, I remember this one particular thing when I thought, what if this was teaching me something? What is it teaching me? Right. If this is part of my purpose, yep. What will I, how will I refer to this part of my journey when I'm sharing it further up the road?
Right. Yeah.
I had to, because it was the hope thing. If I didn't have that tiny speck of hope, I would have clearly like ended it a long time ago. And I was very close to that on a few times. But I think that's why I kind of want to talk more about the wise bears, because I think there can be, as adults, we can almost dismiss the inner child in us. And as you talk about balance and all the different areas of our life, if we're not connected to our own inner child to have, you know, the joy and the peace and the, you know, and the play, then we can get really sad and down and depressed. So, so I kind of went off on a rant there, but no, I think it's very important for people to open to that and allow themselves a bit of play, if you like. Yeah,
definitely. And I think there's a couple of things. First of all, you asked yourself a great question at that time. I can't remember exactly what you just said a moment ago, but that you asked yourself, I think it was, how is this going to help me with my purpose? I think it was something along those lines. So again, it just demonstrates that when you see people that have broken through, have achieved something, it often starts with a question. So, you know, again, for your audience, let's not miss that. So the wise bear, really, what I wanted to do with them, or one of the things, was help children have what I call learn how to think rather than what to think. Because very often as kids, you know, they look up to somebody else and go, okay, what should I be thinking now? What should I be doing now? And I wanted them to be empowered to learn how to think. And that's really what they're about. So whatever the situation is, so far at the moment, there are 6 books in the collection. And they're all actually based on real stories, because they're things that my children came back home with. And
which adds the extra meaning to them as well, I think.
Yeah. And obviously, and in some respects, they're easier to write, because obviously I'm going back through memory. But they take different areas of classical areas that children will go through. So, you know, friendship ones, subjects at school they don't like doing, being bullied, criticized, and then actually, you know, from a home one of, you know, I want something, why can't I have it? You know, these different scenarios. And so what I did was take those and help them to actually open up their mind through the stories. So that, again, the wise bear ask the children questions, and in the story the children resist them. They don't want to answer that question, because they want it the way they want it, whether that be a complaint or whatever it may be. And so the story is really about helping children learn how to think, often by asking other questions, by seeing another side. And a real nice simple one is that any challenge we face, we tend to think it is all negative, particularly at the time we're going through it, a bit like you alluded to earlier with your story. But actually, there is always benefits. You know, there's some great sayings that have come from, you know, years and years ago, that clever people didn't just say them for a reason. You know, every cloud has a silver lining. You know, there is benefits in the challenges we're going through, and we need to look.
You might not be able to see it at that moment, but you just have to know, have faith.
But I'm a great believer, Wendy, that if you know how to ask the question in the moment, you'll start to see it either in the moment or at least very quickly. You won't have to wait a year to find out the silver line. You can find it much quicker. And that really, in a nutshell, is what I want the books to do for children, is don't let them have the anxiety for a week or 2 weeks or a year. Don't let them feel intimidated that period of time. Let's ask the questions now to help them find the bit they hadn't seen. And, obviously one of the stories, but my daughter was going through a period of time where she would be what you'd classically called being bullied at school. But actually, when we found out the benefits, she realized that actually there was somebody else who was always ready to play with her. And the way she played with that girl always actually included her with her ideas, let her express her ideas. Whereas the group she wanted to play with, when they did let her play, she just had to do what they told them to do. They told her to do. And so she started to see, actually, that is a benefit for me over there. And actually that benefit almost outweighs now what I thought I was missing. And so she found that very quickly, and she was going through, a couple of weeks of quite strong anxiety about the whole thing, but it dissolved very quickly once she was able to find that. And and so I'm using that all the time with them, but that's what really the stories are really there to try and help children learn how to think in classical situations. So the idea being then, now you're training them that now they will start to apply that in other situations and in other areas of their life as they come up. I mean, my plan is very much to write. I have 24 titles planned based on different events that have gone on. But my hope is that once you've stretched that child's mind to be able to see it in a slightly different way, they will then see it in a different way forevermore. That's my wish. And as I think you said, that if we can get that in young, what a difference could that make for the rest of their life?
It's huge, because I use the phrase, certainly through journaling and meditation, you're retraining the brain to manage the mind. And then what you're doing with these questions and through these books and through these visual ways as well is not only for children, but for adults to kind of go, oh, I didn't know that I didn't even know that was an option to think that way. I didn't even know that was an option to even to turn that around, because you don't know what you don't know. And I know at points on my pathway is kind of like, oh, I can't wait to see what good's going to come from all of this. Or they say, oh, roses come up through the best piles of manure and all this kind of stuff. I just think I have to think that way. And I try to find the humor, or trying to go, oh, this is interesting, so and document the journey. Again, that's another thing that Russell Brunson talks about, document the journey, because sometimes we kind of can't see. But exactly even just that analogy you talked about with your daughter, that she hadn't actually realized what she was getting from that girl, and yet going into a community group, because again, there's a lot of social pressures from children to adults, and sometimes we can be aligned with people who are incredibly toxic. But we're constantly kind of subconsciously trying to kind of rewrite history, or trying to make it right, when actually, as you say, the questions we're asking ourselves is like, okay, if I just stop and think what's going on here, and actually can I do it in a different way, then I realize I have different choices. And then that it makes things kind of, rather than being reactive all the time, which creates a lot of anxiety in itself, and slow things down and just be aware is fantastic. But I love the work that you do.
Thank you.
As a family, we're a big fan, and
That's
we're
nice.
Going to watch the videos. Well, I think, as I say, it's important to me. I know when my children were young, I knew that I'd grown up in a very dysfunctional family, so I needed to do things differently. I used to read The Power of Positive Parenting. I think that's, if you've read that, heard that book. I mean, that's that's an old book. But I'm like, wow, I didn't know. So I knew I had to expand my mind, because I thought, dysfunction, don't want it. I'm going to have to work really hard to clear out or pull out the weed roots that are in there. So perhaps you could share with people how they can get in touch with you. We'll have links here below.
Sure. So really two ways. I mean, for the stories, the website is called thewisebearstories.com, and please come along, and then you'll find out a bit more information on there. And then because of as we started at the beginning, my coaching career is quite eclectic. So scottcranfield.com will give you a bit more insight into all the different things that I'm involved in and the different things I do.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure, as always, to catch up with you, and incredible the work that you're doing. And you're really, it's like grassroots, start with the children and let them expand their minds, and hopefully educate their parents.
And well, exactly. We often get the feedback actually from the adults or the teachers going, oh, actually, I didn't know that. That's helped me a lot. So that's quite nice as well.
Exactly. Well, look, thank you so much for being on. It's been an absolute
Wendy.
pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Heal Endometriosis Naturally with Wendy K Laidlaw. And I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and rate us. If you're interested in learning more, you can download your top 5 jumpstart tips at healendometriosisnaturally.com and jump on the VIP email list. Remember to keep you number one. The world needs a healthy you.